back to the most fabulous podcast in the world, Paris Lesbos. And today we're doing one of the greatest female modernist writers, one whose work has confused many a soul. It's Djuna Barnes.
Djuna? What a name.
Yes. Well, her siblings all had interesting names too. There was a brother called Shangar.
Ooh, where did they get that?
I think they made it up or they got it from some book.
Mm. And what about Djuna?
I have found nothing that indicates how her parents chose her name. But it is a strange family, so I wouldn't be surprised if they completely made it up.
I love it. So what was her childhood like?
Well, we begin with her birth in a log cabin in 1892 on Storm King Mountain in New York State.
Ooh, Storm King Mountain. Sounds very mythic.
It does. The shine of mythology ends there.
Oh no.
So her father was a polygamist, a failed artist, and was supported by his mother who believed her son was a misunderstood artistic genius.
Wow. I don't know, that sounds kind of maybe Greek mythology. You get something like that.
Well, he also thought polygamy was a great idea and that it would decrease poverty.
I mean, if you're all pooling your resources, like, that makes sense. You're splitting rent more ways. Or a mortgage or whatever.
Yes, but this is a man who is supported by his mother, and he still thinks it's a great idea to have a wife and a mistress who he calls his second wife.
Yeah, so at the time when maybe women weren't as expected to have jobs, and it sounds like he was not picking women who were particularly wealthy, maybe polygamy or polyamory are better ideas when you're already wealthy.
Are you referencing Natalie Barney?
I mean, not intentionally, but I'm just saying, like it works if you, well, yeah, I guess if the model then was that the man supported the woman, and so really you'd want to have multiple men supporting one woman, or multiple women who could already support themselves.
Yes, that was not the case with this. So, Djuna was the second child of her mother and her father, and between the two of them, they had 4 siblings, and then her father gave her 3 half-siblings with his second wife. And
His second and concurrent wife.
Yes, and this is where she gets her distaste for childbearing and motherhood.
I can imagine. Like, if you were already kind of on the fence, that would sure be a way to tell whether you liked it or not.
Both women, named Elizabeth, actually, both of them had the same name, even.
So he has a type.
Yes, if your name is Elizabeth, run. But anyway, both women actually gave birth without any painkillers, and Djuna, who is the second oldest, is sort of helping with all her younger siblings and whatnot, so a great deal of distaste.
Yeah, no, she understands that there's pain involved. She understands probably that there's a lot of work.
Yes, and it doesn't help that she believes that her mother favors her brothers, so there's tension there. This is also a really tiny log cabin, so a lot of the time she sleeps in the same bed as her grandmother.
So quarters were tight. Yeah, at that point I would also be like, maybe when I strike out on my own, it'll be on my own.
Yes, but it's also a very strange family. They were rather open about sexual matters, and many people, because of the time period it was in, have thought in passing that there was some incest going on.
Cool. Oh no. Well, I hope she wasn't scarred too much by that if it happened. That's just takes claustrophobia to a new level.
Yes, and she was also educated at home, so she couldn't, say, escape to school for most of the day during the week.
Mm-hmm. Did she have, like, a social circle outside of her family?
Not particularly. So, Percy Faulkner, the brother of her father's mistress, second wife, concurrent second wife, whatever you want to call her, was around, and the entire family was very much involved with the arts, though less so when you're in a log cabin on a mountain in upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot less people to be involved with.
That makes sense. That sounds really stifling.
Yes, and then she married. I'm using quotations around the word married because there's thoughts that it wasn't really a legal marriage, more of a common law, maybe, marriage, with Percy Faulkner, the brother of her dad's mistress. In 19...
Interesting choice. Was it a choice?
There's debate, but it's 1910 and she's only 18.
Oof. Yeah, so whether or not it was like a choice, it might have also been what her family wanted her to do and what she felt obligated to do.
So, for instance, her grandmother thought that Djuna liked Percy.
Mm-hmm. Her grandmother, who may or may not have been doing incest things with her.
Yes, and there's debate over whether or not her father basically sold her to Percy or not.
Loving this family.
But anyway, it didn't last long. She left him about a few months in.
I'm glad she found the courage to leave. Where did she go after that?
She returned home, but then her mother and father got divorced. Her father married his mistress, and her mother took her and her brothers to New York City.
Well, finally out of that log cabin.
Yes, and into a claustrophobic apartment.
Gosh, out of the frying pan into the fire. Did she make any outside friends there? Like, did she have a life now?
She started to, so Djuna became the breadwinner.
All right, then. How did she do that?
Journalism. She became a freelance journalist. So, for instance, there's the story of her walking into a job saying that they would be a fool not to hire her.
Wow, did she have anything to back that up with? Like, had she what was her schooling like? Did she actually know enough to be a good journalist at the time?
She could write and she could draw.
And I guess that's all you need.
Well, it also helped that her grandmother's brother paid for her tuition to Pratt University for a time, though she left that in 1913.
Mm, good thing that she had some education outside of there. It sounds like she was pretty insulated. Although I guess that means that journalism would be a great spot for her to go for personal growth, if nothing else, like that she's having this opportunity to go new places and learn things about the world.
Mm-hmm. She also took a few classes at the Art Student League of New York. She actually got to study nudes without the harassment faced by Romaine Brooks, even,
Oh,
as
really?
we saw in her episode.
Oh, that's wonderful. How did her family feel about this, though?
It seems they were fine with it as long as she managed to bring in the money to house them and whatnot.
Wow. Yeah, checks out. Beggars can't be choosers. Was journalism like a good industry to get into at the time? Like, did people do that for money?
Yes, they did, and it was easier than it is today.
Because I was gonna like now. I think a lot of people go into it for the passion of it. You like you can. I'm not an expert on journalism, but you can get into the clickbaity stuff really easily. But it's harder to get into the like major publications where you're writing the groundbreaking stories and you're following your passions and whatnot.
Oh, well, she did a lot of what we would consider to be clickbaity. So she was known for stunt journalism, basically, which included the experience of being force fed because the suffragettes went under that same experience in prison.
Wow, kind of the BuzzFeed. I tried that thing. I did the ice bucket challenge or whatever.
Yes, Djuna did not think much of these articles and her journalism in general.
Hmm. Still, it sounds like with the force feeding, like something that was like that got to be pretty impactful on your body, and that's got to make you really like feel things intensely, regardless of how clickbaity the outcome is.
Yes, she also finally got her own apartment in 1915.
Nice. Was she still supporting her family, though, or was she able to be on her own for this?
I think she was probably still sending them some money, but her
Mm.
brothers would have been older and far more capable of doing things on their own as well, and their mother tended to spend more time nagging and following around her brothers than following Djuna.
So I guess the benefit of not being the favorite.
Djuna Barnes is bisexual, and actually her family even is aware of her bisexuality.
Really?
Yes, they talk about it in letters.
Wow. What did they think about it?
They don't make a big deal out of it.
It's
Like
really
it's
nice.
normal.
Honestly, that's goals.
Which is a good thing because at the time she starts dating people, including Gwen Le Gallienne, the stepsister of the actress Eva Le Gallienne, and
Wow.
apparently, yes, and even apparently has an affair with Carl Van Vechten during this time.
Who was this?
A writer and photographer.
Is he like really well known at the time?
Not as much as he will be.
I see.
But then she also meets this man named Ernst Hafstengel, who she nicknamed Pootsie.
I didn't think the name couldn't get any more outrageous, but
Yes, well, she actually comes very close to marrying him.
really?
Yes, her brothers actually think that she would have married him, but anti-German sentiment in World War I sinks his finances, and they break up, partly because of her interest over women and his wanting a German wife.
Oh, that's too bad.
She also weirdly has a sort of common law-ish marriage to a Courtney Lemon during this time, who even nurses her back to health when she gets the Spanish flu, but she leaves him not long after.
All right. So, an interesting group of people it sounds like that she's partnering with and then leaving.
Yes, there's also a Mary Pine who dies of tuberculosis in 1919 with Djuna nursing her.
Oh, wow. That's really sad.
Yes, Djuna also starts to make friends and people she dislikes and who dislikes her because she's now hanging around Greenwich Village and participating in theater there as a member of the Provincetown Players.
Ooh, hanging with the drama kids.
Yes, another member is Edna St. Vincent Millay, who dislikes her, and it comes back even more with Thelma Wood later on in Paris.
Oh no. Oh no. That's tragic. Edna St. Vincent Millay is amazing and wonderful, and it's too bad they couldn't be friends.
And Millay would say such things as, "They would hate it and make fun of it, and old Djuna Barnes would rag you about it, hoping it would get to me." This was in a letter to her sister about a play that she had written.
Wow. So was Juna being like a bad person? Like was this animosity deserved?
I think it's the animosity you get from two people in the same industry who have different opinions over work.
I see. So it's not drama. It's just a minor workplace beef.
Yes, but in the realm of art, it quickly becomes personal.
Mhm. Oh, I see.
She also meets the incredibly strange and deserves her own episode, the Baroness Elsa von Freytag Loringhoven, who would occasionally make sculpture and other art out of trash, and Djuna would write an unfinished biography about her after the Baroness would die.
Wow. Sounds like quite the character.
Oh, you have no idea.
I guess we'll learn about her later.
But anyway, she then leaves Greenwich for Paris in 1921 because she becomes the magazine McCall's reporter over there. And this, despite the culture shock of France, starts the happiest time in Djuna's life.
I mean, that seems to be the case with a lot of these women. That they find their place there.
Yes, well, she promptly falls into Natalie Barney's salon and becomes a fixture there, and according to Natalie, falls into her bed as well.
I mean, but how could you not?
A rite of passage, as many have called it.
Yes. Um, but I mean, we didn't really touch on her in the Natalie episode that much, as I recall. So it's not a relationship as much, is it?
No.
Does she meet any special someone there?
She does in a bit, but she also ends up with friends. She ends up being really close to the writer Mina Loy, who's like the only heterosexual hanging around here. She's actually the only heterosexual in Ladies' Almanac.
Hmm.
She also ends up being somewhat friends with Janet Flanner.
That's cool. So she has her like little gay community over there.
Yes, she does not like Stein, though, as Stein focused on her legs.
How dare she? Did she feel objectified?
Well, you see, it sort of confirmed for Stein that Barnes was not someone to be taken seriously, as Djuna would fume over. Do you know what she said of me? Said I had beautiful legs. Now what does that have to do with anything? Said I had beautiful legs. Now I mean, what did she say that for?
Yeah. I mean, same though. Like Stein, take me seriously as a person. I'm not just an object for your consumption. Hello.
And also take me seriously as a writer.
Right. Well, that we might have to do an episode on Stein just to clear the air around this, but because Stein is seen as like really important as a lesbian writer and a cultural figure, a collector of other people's talents, but also she was like crazy sexist.
Oh yeah, I'm assuming you know the story of she would take all of the male artists into her corner of the apartment and leave all the wives with talkless.
Right. And it's like I'm sure the wives were interesting and cool and like undervalued in their own rights, but also, why can't they all just mingle together, Stein? Why do you have to be like a man in order for you to like get approval, and why can't other women join your little club? Anyway.
That's a whole other can of worms. But speaking of writing, so Juna, she had published a bit of poetry, short stories, that sort of thing when she was in New York, but it had primarily been journalism. Paris, though, is where she really writes her novels. Starting with The Novel Writer, which is about a family similar to her own and focuses on sexuality and polygamy, and also possibly has incest. It's very obliquely referenced if it is in there, and is actually dedicated to Thelma Wood, her new lover, and the great love of her life, actually.
An interesting choice. That doesn't sound particularly romantic, but I guess speaks to a closeness.
Yes, to closeness. So, Thelma Wood in 1920 or 1921 ends up in Paris to study sculpting, and she actually has an affair with Bernice Abbott, who knows Juna, and the two meet through Abbott, who is a photographer. But different episode, probably.
That's just such a classic sapphic story of like meeting someone through their like girlfriend at the time or like ex.
Yes, Juna actually ends up sort of steering Thelma away from sculpture and into silverpoint, though Wood's work is not well known. She did a lot of drawings of animals and silverpoint and other things, and was apparently a very good cook as well.
Hmm. Now, what is silverpoint?
Silverpoint is the art of drawing with a silver-pointed instrument on paper prepared with a coating of powdered bone or zinc white, creating a fine, durable line composed of metal fragments.
Ooh, sounds really pretty.
Yes, it's a drawing technique first used by medieval scribes on manuscripts.
Wow. So while some people were going and living their best ancient Greek lives, others were doing the medieval thing.
It's funny you should mention that Ladies' Almanac, which is also dedicated to Thelma, is very Chaucerian influenced.
Hmm. Interesting.
Now, just because Thelma is the great love of Junia's life does not mean they're always good for each other.
Oh no! What happens?
Well, you see, it starts off well, so they end up moving into a shared apartment. They get a cat they name Dilly. They talk about art. Thelma can cook while Djuna can't. And according to Mina Loy's daughter, they apparently also smoked weed.
Love it. That sounds like they're living their best life.
But it goes downhill. So Thelma is an alcoholic who attracts a lot of attention from men and women, which Djuna initially enjoyed, though she also once hit a man with a stick on the head when he came up the stairs to their apartment because he had amorous designs on Thelma.
All right, so she is protecting her territory.
Yes, strangely for the milieu she's in, Djuna very much wants monogamy.
Really? I wonder why.
But Thelma is rather incapable of fidelity, so she has an affair with the poet Millet, which just causes even more of a rift with between Barnes and Millet than there was in Greenwich Village, and it's also on her knees she proposed sex to Peggy Guggenheim.
All right then.
She also, in the room where Djuna was, got her friend or acquaintance anyway, Emily Coleman, another writer and diarist, between her legs and said that Coleman was a servant of art.
All right. Dang. Oh, that must have been so upsetting for Djuna to come from this like background where she saw polygamy not working out very well. Um and uh and she's like, "Okay, I'm going to live my own life." And here it is coming back to her.
Yes, well, the alcoholism didn't help, so if you can imagine Thelma going out drinking from cafe to cafe and ending up in who knows whose bed, and Djuna chasing after, going from cafe to cafe, also drinking and ending up as drunk as Thelma in the end, it really sums up how downhill it went.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine being very worried about that. Like, we've heard how others of these women were dealing with substance abuse as well, and it's just really troubling when your partner can't control things like that.
Yes, and when Djuna couldn't get monogamy, she demanded honesty, uh, but alcoholic amnesia, Wood didn't always know whose bed she'd been in.
Oh no. That just sounds like a really rough time. Like you have this person you really care about, but they have a serious problem and also want different things, it sounds like.
Yes, well, Thelma would meet her next lover, Henriette Metcalf, in 1928, which pushed the affair even more towards death, and Nightwood would widen the rift and really truly put an end to it because, for instance, the ending of it, many people interpreted it as Robin, the character modeled after Thelma, as having sex with a dog.
All right, that is certainly one thing that you can say about your ex.
Yes, it is. Djuna, though, always proclaimed that that was not the case, actually.
Mhm.
She would proclaim that the dog is not being romantic towards Robin. It is furious at the mystery of her drunkenness, a kind of exorcism of what it does not understand. And apparently, the scene had been suggested to her by an acquaintance, Fitzy, who once, when drunk, playfully pretended that her dog Buffy was her sweetheart. Her strange behavior made Buffy highly nervous.
Mhm. That sounds concerning.
Yes, well, Juno was also apparently rather well known for her obliviousness of how people would interpret her writing.
See. Do we have any other instances of this?
Not that it is mentioned, it mostly focuses on the dog and Robin and both Emily Coleman and Peggy Guggenheim being amazed that Juno was completely unaware of the implications of what she just wrote.
Mhm.
Nightwood itself is actually somewhat autobiographical, so it's the story of the relationship of Nora and Robin, aka Djuna and Thelma, though Robin is married with a child to refute the idea that lesbians would be straight if they only had a man.
That's a cool thing to just put out there. Just a little thing to say, hey, culture, you're wrong.
Yes, apparently in a previous draft, the character of Nora actually had 2 sons.
Just really making it clear. Yeah, that is because a lot of times people will, even today, trot that out as like, oh well, if you got a manly enough man, he'll show you how to be a woman.
Yes, Nightwood is considered to be a modernist masterpiece. There's many different interpretations of everything in it, but you could do an entire episode in and of itself on Nightwood.
Right, and including the interpretations that she didn't know she was writing.
Or that she was unaware that people would make. But either way, they break up, but still write to each other sometimes. She then apparently swore off women and had an affair with the writer Charles Henry Ford, who's much younger than her, and it includes traveling to the Maghreb and an accidental pregnancy that ends in an abortion in Paris. But he also inspires the short love story Behind the Heart, which is only published after her death.
Oh. Is there a reason that they held off publishing it? Like, is there anything scandalous in there?
We just went over Nightwood and the scene many interpreted as bestiality. I would say there is not really any.
She's just not taking chances.
Or she just doesn't feel like publishing it, but I wouldn't call it scandaless. So that affair.
She all right?
Djuna?
Yeah, I mean, she just like had this horrible breakup, went off to live with a guy, had to get an abortion at this time period, which was probably like really terrifying. Like that sounds like a lot of things to be going through.
It was. But she doesn't go downhill quite yet. She instead then decide to move into an English manor with Peggy Guggenheim and Emily Coleman in the early 1930s. Guggenheim's lover John Holmes is also with them, and it's almost like a weird menage a trois between Guggenheim, Holmes, and Coleman.
Interesting. So she escaped her polygamy house only to get to another polygamy house?
Almost. There's not nearly as much sex stuff, it seems like, but like Coleman would sleep on occasion in the same bed as Guggenheim and Holmes, and Guggenheim would be trying to sleep, and Coleman and Holmes would be staying up talking about stuff.
Oh, wow, okay. That actually sounds kind of wholesome and nice.
I mean, not always. You have a bunch of writers and artists in one house and talking about art and writing. So, for instance, Djuna is still writing Nightwood at this time, and it's a bunch of egos and shenanigans ensue.
Mm-hmm.
While there is a talking about writing and working on writing, there's also flirting and a description I can only interpret as Barnes dry humped Coleman into an orgasm.
Interesting.
So the writing of the incident comes from Coleman's diaries, where she talks about Djuna had washed her red hair and started flirting with Holmes and kissing him, and they were making all sorts of innuendos. Then she began to pound Peggy in the bottom, and Peggy shrieked, "My God, how this woman hates me!" And Djuna kept pounding her, and then she began to pound me, meaning Coleman. She hadn't hit me 4 times before I had an orgasm.
Interesting.
So, weird shenanigans.
Weird is one adjective. So that, yeah, this is an interesting situation. Is this working out for her?
Creatively, yes, because she gets a great deal of editing feedback on Nightwood. She doesn't stay there for more than a few summers, though, but Guggenheim actually gives her money in the form of a fellowship.
Oh, wow. So in this polyamory household, they do have money.
Yes. Or Guggenheim has money.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess we should have known that, since her name is rather well known.
But anyway, Djuna returns to New York City in 1933. She's continuing to edit Nightwood and trying to find a publisher for it. She also has an affair with a Peter No-Go. I probably mispronounced his last name. But anyway, he leads her on for years, so that doesn't work out. She returns to Europe in 1936. Nightwood is published in October of that year and causes quite a stir. Thelma Wood is not pleased, as can be imagined.
It's another case similar to our last episode where when people write stuff about you, sometimes you don't like it.
Djuna gets a lot more attention for it. Lady Ottoline Morel, another patron of the arts in this circle, sends her invitations, but Barnes actually very much likes her privacy and is wary of her because Morel asks her if she's a lesbian. So she then decides to sell her Paris apartment in 1937 and move to England to be near Emily Coleman. This doesn't last very long, but she has actually her last major affair with a mining engineer, which also does not end well.
Interesting choice, though. I like the variety.
So she moves back to Paris, but she's becoming an alcoholic, and her friends are worried about her and about the situation in Europe.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. It's a rough time for everyone.
But anyway, her friends, primarily Guggenheim, send her back to New York, where, on her family's wishes, she ends up in a sanatorium, which enrages Barnes, and she plots to write vindictively about them all.
I can imagine. How is she treated there?
Well, she somehow acquired whiskey. For the first week, she stayed in her room. Then she gave the psychiatrist fits, but she befriended the kitchen staff.
All right, so she's not complying, we can say.
Yes, and then she ends up on a ranch in Arizona with Emily Coleman and Coleman's lover of the time, but she doesn't stay there long before heading back to New York City, where she gets an apartment in Patchen Place, which reminds her of Greenwich Village, and she actually stays there until she dies.
So she's found a place to settle down after all of this hopping about.
She finally quits drinking and tries to be healthy after beating her body up for years. She also quits having love affairs.
Does she feel like that's also part of a self-improvement thing?
Oh, she really does. So, for instance, she's still corresponding with several people from the Paris days, including Natalie Barney. And Natalie writes to her talking about whether or not she has a new petite amie. Barnes says no, she does not. In fact, she says, if I saw one, I would jump into the river.
Wow. So she is having none of it.
No more love affairs, neither men nor women. No one has been good to her.
Wow. I guess it's better than a lot of these women who end up pining over someone till their death, or horribly estranged from someone, or otherwise having problems with relationships.
Unlike the song from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Without Love You Can Change the World, Barnes does not do that. She writes one more book, The Antiphon, which is the family revenge story she had begun plotting when her family put her away for drinking.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly, she became a recluse who refused interviews and clung to privacy, fearing she would be categorized as a lesbian writer.
I mean, I get that. You don't want to be pigeonholed.
Yes, and she very much wanted to be taken seriously. But she was not as much of a recluse as she made herself out to be. She actually would still go out with friends on occasion.
I see. So yeah, so she's living her best life. She just doesn't want, the paparazzi or whoever.
Yeah, she doesn't want interviews. She doesn't like people prying into her private life, which is slightly odd considering how much of her work is autobiographical.
No, but it's on her own terms. Like this is a thing that you see a lot with even today, um, media personalities who don't want people getting into their business. They want to tell their story from their perspective using their words.
Very true. Even so, you can't stop people from misinterpreting it, as we have seen.
Right, yes. So she's trying her best.
And despite such quips about death, such as, I'll probably scream my lungs out and hang on like a cat on a curtain, Barnes doesn't have the strength to go out like that and dies attended by a nurse in 1982.
How old is
And
she?
she is 90 at the time.
All right. I think that's holding on to life pretty firmly.
She's a few years under how long Natalie and Romaine made it. We'll say that.
All right, so she didn't quite win, but she's certainly a runner-up.
Yes, because there's someone from this milieu that lived to be 100.
Oh, really? Who?
Elizabeth Eyre de Lennox, who had a minor affair with Natalie on and off.
All right, well, we may or may not get to her, I guess.
But anyway, the rage at her family remained through the end because none of her family was invited to the spreading of her ashes at Storm King Mountain, nor were they given any inheritance of any kind.
Dang, she really went for them.
She did.
Did she give anything to her friends? Like,
There is no mention of her friends getting anything, only what happened to her papers and to her copyrights.
I see. Yeah. Sounds like her main aim there was to make a statement against her family.
Oh yes, embittered about them to the end. There is actually a poem that Djuna wrote for Mary Pine when she died that also connects rather well to her. For you, for me, why when the striking hour, the wind among the curtains, and the tread of some late gardener pulling at the flower, they'll lay between our hearts when we are dead.
Now, did other people write things about her as well?
Well, there are biographies about her and she appears in people's memoirs, but if you're asking if there was a Dolly Wilde-esque biography created, no.
Mm-hmm. What did people write about her? Like her friends, did they like do little poems about her? Which books does she feature in? Is she like so away from most of the drama that people like don't include her in it in their diss track books or
She only really appears in other people's memoirs and biographies and things like that. She's not Natalie Barney, shall we say, appearing in everyone's works, from Colette
right,
to
so
Radcliffe Hall.
she's not ruining things for everyone so they don't feel the need to write vengeful things about her.
And she hasn't bedded everyone so they don't feel the need to write about their ex-lovers, including her.
Right. Yeah, no, that's fair. She's not um concerned with vetting all of her friend group, unlike some people.
Very, very true.
She will diversify.
Into mining engineers.
Right. Um, so, so then what is the lesson that she teaches us?
When writing your masterpiece, make sure others don't interpret it as screwing the pooch.